One of the three key points of the Nestea formula is intermittent fasting. The other two being cardiovascular exercise, 30 minutes every day, and Mediterranean type cuisine. I want to concentrate here on intermittent fasting, what that means, and what it involves, because there's quite a lot of misinformation about intermittent fasting and how it should be done and the benefits. Firstly, intermittent fasting does not equate to starvation. Okay, starvation is bad, and it's actually quite difficult to do. If you try and starve yourself for anything more than 24 hours, it's difficult to do. You feel miserable. You'll see some benefit, but not necessarily in the long term. So you've got to be kind to yourself, and I think the ideal is an 18-hour fast every day and a 6-hour feeding day. And the whole idea of doing intermittent fasting is to eliminate insulin resistance. And insulin resistance builds up when you force your body to produce too much insulin, and that is the thing that is driving your obesity and also making you feel sick. And I've talked about that in another video in more detail. Intermittent fasting also does not equate to intermittent severe calorie restriction on certain days, okay, as proposed by some authors. Intermittent severe calorie restriction is severe calorie restriction. If you drop your calorie intake down to say 1,000 calories a day, or 800 calories a day, or 500 calories a day, that is intermittent severe calorie restriction. It's not intermittent fasting. And importantly, that won't work in the long term. It's not sustainable. You will lose some weight, and that's because you will partially eliminate your insulin resistance, but not totally. So the secret is to get rid of your insulin resistance, and I believe the only way that you can do that in a sustainable way, and when I say sustainable, I'm talking about a method that is, number one, it works, and this does work. I'm not speaking from my own personal experience, although clearly, as you can see, it works for me. But I'm speaking from the experience of telling or advising hundreds of my patients about the benefits of intermittent fasting. They've gone away and done it, and the honest ones have come back and said to me, Andrew, you're absolutely right, this works. So firstly, it works, and the Greeks showed us that 3,000 years ago. I mean, they did it for mental clarity, not for weight loss, but it certainly works for that. Number two, anybody can do it. Pretty much anybody can do it. There'll be very, very few medical conditions where you wouldn't be allowed to do it. And frankly, off the top of my head, as a doctor, I can't think of any. Number three, it's cheap. It doesn't cost anything. In fact, if anything, you're going to save money. And number four, it's easy to do. You don't have to count calories. You don't have to weigh your food. All you need to do is actually look at the clock on the wall and find out what time it is, and start eating around midday. Have a nice salad for lunch with some protein and some fat, and then you can snack in the afternoon on some things like some nuts, or a bit of some avocado, or a little bit of cheese, and then in the evening, of course, you have your main meal, which is once again a mix of protein in the form of meat or fish, some fat, which is absolutely fine. Fat does not make you fat. Refined carbohydrate makes you fat, and some carbohydrates in the form of your vegetables. Okay, that's where you're going to get that's where you're going to get your carbohydrate from vegetables. Those are the fresh, whole vegetables. Okay, you're going to avoid things like bread, cakes, pasta, sugar, of course, all refined carbohydrate. In the book, I talk about avoiding things like rice and potatoes, and you'll see that in quite a lot of my recipes, I do actually use those use rice and potatoes. The reality is, you can use those in moderation, and that's the reality here. That's what we should all be doing: is everything in moderation. And if you did that, it would still work. If you want to turbocharge your weight loss, then yes, initially you've got to sort of eliminate probably potatoes and rice. Uh, but once you're down at your biological optimum weight and you have biological optimum function, which I've talked about in another video, then you can be a bit more relaxed. And that's why I allow them in some of the recipes. So that is intermittent fasting. Now, I'll mention at this point also about ketosis, because there's a lot of misinformation about ketosis and the so-called ketogenic diet. And some people equate intermittent fasting with the ketogenic diet. I guess for most people, the ketogenic diet equates to severe carbohydrate restriction. And I just don't think that's necessary. First of all, ketosis only kicks in, and ketosis is completely separate from lipolysis. Lipolysis is the breakdown of fatty acids, breakdown of fat into fatty acids, and happens around the whole body. Ketosis is a process that happens in the liver, undertaken by the liver cells, and is the conversion of fat and fatty acids to ketone bodies. Those being three compounds: beta-hydroxybutyrate, acetoacetate, and their spontaneous breakdown product, acetone. And all of those three then get converted to acetyl-CoA, which, as you know from my book and the website, is the entry point for the Krebs cycle. And that's where the energy substrates go in and get used as energy. Ketosis has evolved, the generation of ketone bodies, which happens, I might say, after about 3 days of starvation, is a backup for the brain. So the brain cannot use fatty acids. The rest of the body, the brain and the spinal cord, the central nervous system, cannot use fatty acids as an energy substrate. It has an obligatory requirement for glucose. And ketosis has evolved after, say, it starts after about 3 days of starvation, has evolved under the circumstances when primitive man, where his food ran out, and whilst he still had a backup for the glucose, where your body can generate its own glucose, it had this backup facility of ketone bodies, because it can use ketone bodies. So my advice, I guess, what I'm trying to say is just ignore the whole ketosis thing. You know, there's so much information. It's used in the wrong ways. The wrong terms are being used. It's being used and promoted by people who simply don't understand how the human body works. And it's all immensely frustrating. And there's absolutely no point in trying to lose weight by cutting out carbohydrate, because fresh vegetables, which is where you should be getting your carbohydrate from, is an excellent source of energy. You get this very low rise in blood insulin because your body takes a long time to digest the carbohydrate that's in vegetables, because there's a lot of fiber attached to it. And that's the other reason why you need to take in a good amount of carbohydrate in the form of vegetables for your fiber. But also, if you cut out carbohydrate, i.e. cut out fresh vegetables, all your food is going to be immensely boring, because you're then down to just protein and fat, really. And I can't think of anything more boring. It's even more boring than going vegetarian, because with vegetarian, of course, you're cutting out meat and fish and those sort of things. That's very boring, and you certainly shouldn't be going carnivorous, where you cut out everything, obviously, apart from meat, because we did not evolve as carnivores. It will work as far as getting rid of insulin resistance is concerned, but how boring is your food? Just meat and fish. They're nice, but you've got to add in some vegetables. So intermittent fasting. Back to intermittent. The way I think you should do your intermittent fasting is 18 hours fasting every day, 6-hour feeding window. Easiest thing to do is to cut out breakfast, but obviously don't forget to do your Mediterranean type cuisine, and your 30 minutes of cardiovascular exercise every day. Something you do for the rest of your life. You don't do it for 12 weeks, go back to what you're doing before. Okay, you do it for the rest of your life. Totally sustainable.